Hi, welcome back to the basement. I'm Steve Lewis. Today we continue our look at the first quarter of 1973, the months of January, February, and March, with movies, television, the news, and a look at Beach Boy events. In movies, modern times were being depicted with a new grittiness. The future looked bleak, and the recent past was looked at more nostalgically and wistfully, especially the 1950s and even the 1930s. The average cost of a movie ticket in 1973 was $1.77. As the year began, the number one film in the country remained Irwin Allen's The Poseidon Adventure. It'll remain number one for 10 of the first 12 weeks of 1973. In the other two of those 12 weeks, The Getaway, starring Steve McQueen and Ali MacGraw, will take the number one spot. The Poseidon Adventure was certainly not the first disaster movie, but it sort of formalized the template for a lot of movies to come in the next few years. Get a couple of big-name stars and another dozen or so contrasting support players recognizable to most of the audience, introduce them as flawed characters with hidden strengths and or challenges to be overcome, throw them into some kind of cataclysm using lots of special effects, and pose the question, who will survive? It was a film that really kicked off one of the most popular genres of the decade. If the Poseidon Adventure pointed the way toward the rise of disaster movies, another new hot genre was already arriving in '73. The success of the TV series Kung Fu had indicated that there was a market for martial arts movies in the US. In '73, US film companies began successfully importing Hong Kong-made martial arts movies, popularly known at the time as Kung Fu movies. The first major success came with Five Fingers of Death, originally known in Hong Kong as King Boxer and released in the US in March. It'll be number one at the US box office for 2 non-consecutive weeks in the spring. Next came the US release of Fists of Fury, known as The Big Boss when it was released in Hong Kong in 1971. It starred Bruce Lee, the former Kato from the 1966 Green Hornet TV series, in his first lead role in a motion picture. It'll be number one in the US the week of May 9th. Confusingly, Lee's second starring role was in a 1972 film known in Hong Kong as Fist of Fury. In June 1973, it'll be released in the US as The Chinese Connection, a title designed to tie into the success of the 1971 film The French Connection. The Chinese Connection will go to number one in the US for the week of June 13th. We'll talk more about Bruce Lee later on. As the year goes on, more non-Bruce Lee Hong Kong martial arts films do well at the US box office, with several of them going all the way to the number one spot, including The Hammer of God on June 20th, Corrado, the Kung Fu Flash, aka Corrado the Hong Kong Cat, on August 1st, Lady Kung Fu on September 12th, The Shanghai Killers on September 19th, and Deadly China Doll on October 13th. The quality of these movies ranges from pretty good to absolutely abysmal, but that seems to be part of the novelty and attraction. Notable releases in US theaters in the first quarter included, on February 2nd, The World's Greatest Athlete, Disney's live-action family comedy starring Tim Conway, Jan Michael Vincent, and John Amos. Opening in wide release in the US on February 7th was Last Tango in Paris, a controversial, sexually explicit film by Bernardo Bertolucci. It stars Marlon Brando and Maria Schneider. It'll generate a lot of buzz and reach number one at the US box office on May 23rd. Opening on February 22nd and rolling out slowly across the country into the summer was Walking Tall, based on the true story of tough, incorruptible Tennessee Sheriff Buford Pusser, starring Joe Don Baker. He was going to give them law and order or die trying. Opening on March 1st was Charlotte's Web, an animated family feature based on the beloved book by E.B. White. On March 17th came Peter Finch and Liv Ullmann in the musical drama Lost Horizon. And premiering in New York on March 28th was The Devil and Miss Jones, another highly successful porno feature following last year's Deep Throat. It will reportedly ultimately become the 10th highest grossing film of 1973. On television, too, there's at least a new pseudo-realism to many shows. The wildest sitcoms like The Beverly Hillbillies and Bewitched are long gone and replaced with the likes of All in the Family, Sanford and Son, and Maude. The other big TV genre, crime dramas, also have some of that new grittiness that we're seeing in movies, although in a much diluted, more family-friendly form. On January 6th, Multiplication Rock debuts between kid shows on ABC's Saturday morning lineup. In response to complaints about kid shows having no educational value, and I think Sesame Street having recently proven that education could be entertaining as well, these short musical segments were introduced to help kids memorize their multiplication tables. The songs were catchy and well performed. My personal favorite was Lucky 7 Samson, and I still sometimes count by threes to the chorus of 3 is a magic number. On Friday, January 19th, In Concert, which had premiered as a special in November '72, began as a regular bi-weekly series airing every other Friday night at 11:30 p.m. on ABC. Just 2 weeks later, on Friday, February 2nd, NBC launches their own late-night rock show, The Midnight Special. The Midnight Special is on even later than In Concert, airing after Johnny Carson's Tonight Show, which was 1 a.m. in most markets, around the time most TV stations had been shutting down for the night. The first episode is hosted by Helen Reddy with guest performers Ike and Tina Turner, The Byrds, Don McLean, Curtis Mayfield, and George Carlin. On Wednesday, January 24th, a year and a half after completing his 9-year run as Jed Clampett on the Beverly Hillbillies, Buddy Ebsen returns to CBS as mild-mannered detective Barnaby Jones, a Quinn Martin production. It'll find an audience and run until 1980. On Wednesday, March 7th, the made-for-TV movie The $6 Million Man is broadcast on ABC. It stars Lee Majors and is based on Martin Caden's best-selling 1972 novel Cyborg. The 90-minute film also serves as a pilot for a possible new TV series. It'll draw high ratings and inspire ABC to pick up the series for the fall. One night later, on Thursday, March 8th, CBS aired the made-for-TV movie The Marcus Nelson Murders, based on an actual New York City murder case. The movie introduced Telly Savalas as Police Lieutenant Theo Kojak. It too would draw high ratings and inspire CBS to create a series for Kojak in the fall. Now let's take a look at some of the major news stories from the first quarter. On January 20th, Richard Nixon begins his second term as president following his landslide re-election victory in November. On January 22nd, the man who Nixon replaced in the White House in 1969, Lyndon Johnson, dies at the age of 64, just 2 days after what was once, years ago, widely expected might be the end of his second elected term as president. 1 week after the inauguration, on January 27th, U.S. delegates sign a ceasefire agreement in Vietnam, ending America's combat role in the ongoing war. On January 30th, the Supreme Court rendered their controversial decision in the Roe v. Wade case, guaranteeing reproductive choice across all 50 states. On February 7th, the Senate Select Committee on Presidential Campaign Activities, popularly known as the Watergate Committee, is established. On February 28th, members of the American Indian Movement, or AIM, seize hostages and begin an armed standoff in Wounded Knee, South Dakota. The group demands a Senate inquiry into the treatment of Native Americans. U.S. law enforcement lays siege. The conflict sometimes turns violent with serious injury on both sides, and at least 2 supporters of AIM are killed. The siege will end with the group's surrender on May 7th. On March 27th, at the 45th Academy Awards, The Godfather wins both Best Picture of 1972 and Best Actor for Marlon Brando. Brando doesn't attend and instead sends Sacheen Littlefeather, president of the National Native American Affirmative Image Committee, with a statement saying he would not accept the award due to the film industry's treatment of Native Americans. And what were the Beach Boys up to in those first 3 months of the year? Of course, we've already mentioned the release of the Holland album on January 8th. Sail on Sailor, with Only With You on the B-side, is released as a single in February. Despite being the group's strongest single in years, Sail on Sailor peaks at a disappointing number 79 in the US on March 17th. California Saga California, backed with Sail on Sailor, is the lead-off single in the UK. It reaches number 49. When Sail on Sailor is released as an A-side in the UK in June, it'll go to number 37. With the group returned from Holland and a short break in touring, Alan takes the opportunity to move to Big Sur, a place he had already memorialized in song on the new album. He reportedly purchases a property that Mike Love had considered buying just a short time earlier. Dennis reportedly is spending much of his downtime with Murray, fishing and watching boxing on television. Meanwhile, at the group's request, engineer Stephen Moffat has put together a single-disc live album from last fall's concert tour. Warner's will reject the album, reportedly because it contains too many new songs and not enough of their oldies. After a couple of warm-up gigs in February, the group began a 10-week North American tour on March 7th. On March 8th, Steve Love sends a memo to the group and to Jack Riley, informing them that they are contractually obligated to present the Smile album for release by Warner Brothers no later than May or face a $50,000 fine. On March 9th, Carl flies out to meet with manager Jack Riley in Holland, where we know he stayed after the Beach Boys returned to California. While Carl is in Holland, he takes the opportunity to accept the Dutch Edison Award for Surf's Up as the best pop album of 1971 in person. The event is carried on Dutch television. Carl then quickly flies back to Canada, where he rejoins the tour. And that'll bring us to the end of the first quarter. Obviously, there's much more 1973 to come. Next time, we'll begin looking at the Holland album in depth. Then we'll return to look at 1973, April through December. Hope you enjoyed this. I look forward to your comments, and I hope you will join us next time as we begin our discussion of Holland. Meanwhile, have a great week. Thanks for watching. Bye.